And there we are, we're live. Howdy everyone, welcome back to a brand new episode of Deploy Friday, a live stream we have at Platform.sh to discuss cool people doing interesting things in web development and with tech, live every Friday. This week we got a really interesting one I've worked with quite a bit recently. We're talking about search engines, choosing one, deploying them with your apps, and in the case of our guest today, building a business around a search engine provided open source.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm getting a notification that I need to switch to grid mode. I think maybe that did it. Am I the only one on screen still?
I've been on grid since the start.
You still are the only one on screen.
I don't know what you're seeing.
Yep, there we go.
We got it? Sorry about that. So yeah, we have a search engine company starting out open source called Meilisearch that we're here with today. My name's Chad Carlson, and with me today is my co-host, Stephanie Daugherty. How are you doing, Stephanie?
Doing pretty well.
It's good. I haven't seen you in a bit since we were in Paris. And additionally, we have as our guest, Thomas Payet, the COO of Meilisearch. How are you doing, Thomas?
Yes, I'm fine, thank you. And
I'm going to try Erlend Sogge Heggen, who is in the developer relations teams for Meilisearch. How are you doing, man?
Doing good. Hey.
For anyone who's joining us, feel free to leave a comment, questions inside the comment stream, and we'll be sure to bring them into the conversation as we go along, and get to them at the end of the live stream. And as well, you can check in the description at the bottom of the video. I've tried to put a few links for you to get started with Meilisearch, see it in action on our public documentation that we made the change to recently. And I think I also have a link to their getting started tutorials on their documentation. Soon we'll be having a template that I'll drop in the description and we'll be tweeting out. It'll probably be finished within the next day or so. So you can try out Meilisearch on Platform.sh, the same that we're doing with our public documentation. So starting off, Thomas or Erlend, you're both from Meilisearch. Could you maybe take some time, introduce yourself a little bit, tell us what is Meilisearch if they're not familiar with your project or with search engines in general?
Yeah, of course. Meilisearch is an open source search engine. So what we're trying to do is something much more simpler to use than Elastic when it comes to build a search engine on your website. So we begin to work on it in our previous company, and we decided to leave this company in order to build this open source project that we begin to work on.
What was that previous company? So what was the application that you were doing with
yeah, we are three co-founders, and the three of us met at VP, which is a big French e-commerce website. And at some point we needed to work on the search engine, of course, because what we used to have was quite bad. It was an Elasticsearch that was configured and it was giving some very bad answers. For example, when you were searching for robe rouge, which is red dress in French, you were given some result about wine. So that was not very efficient because we had red dresses in stocks. So that was not very good. And at some point we had a project to work on the search engine and try to improve it. So we went, we had to dive into the how does Elastic and Lucene is working under the hood to better understand how to configure it. We made also some benchmark against different solutions that was existing on the search as a service side. And yeah, there were different, how can I say that? We needed to have something self-hosted at some point because we couldn't afford to have to pay based on the number of documents or the number of indexation that you have to do in any search engine. So we wanted something that we could self-host. And there was yeah, the obvious solution is Elastic, but it's still complicated to manage and to handle, because it's very good for a lot of different use cases. But when it comes to just build a search engine for front-end customers, it can be quite painful if you want to understand how does the configuration of Elastic works. So we just wanted something much more simpler to use, something we focus, on a subset. So what we're trying to do is like a prefix search, because we know that the person that will use our search engine, they will just type the beginning of the word, and they want to find the document as fast as possible. They do not need to have complex queries, and you do not need aggregation on top of the whole document that you could have. And usually the data set for this kind of usage are much smaller than, we are not doing analysis on giga data sets. So yeah, we wanted to build something like this, and we saw that Algolia was doing pretty well this kind of job, and we get inspiration from their blog post in order to build our own search engine there.
That's great. I mean, it's interesting that that's sort of the place that you come out of. You see this place where you have one of these big names that's just providing too much complexity and configuration, and it kind of lays the groundwork for you starting a whole software project yourself and really a whole business yourself. I mean, maybe Erlend, what brought you into this company or to search in general? I mean, I know you're developer relations. I don't know your background specifically of if you've always worked in that field or within the language it's in or search.
Yeah, so my prior employment before Meilisearch was with a company called Discourse, and they do open source forum software. Mm-hmm. And I was eventually working there as the VP of community. And by the time that Meilisearch came around, I had been left Discourse about a year ago then, and I'd been spending a lot of my free time just playing around in the Rust ecosystem, more as a hobbyist for game development. And that's kind of how Meili came on my radar. And I ended up contacting them just to say like this was super exciting what they were doing, and I saw a lot of parallels there to what I'd been doing at a Discourse, and they were kind of at the exact same size as when I joined Discourse 4 or 5 years ago. So there was a lot of experience there that I could share as well in terms of the path that they now had ahead of themselves as an open source based company. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm trying to do now, is to just take all of that experience I've had from already being part of building up an open source company almost from the ground up, starting with this small team, and trying to figure out how that can also play into the business's strengths, as the kind of larger industry is also trying to figure out now with the open core and commercial open source software in general is starting to standardize a bit more around more established models on how you just do this thing. When you have an open source product that you want to drive forward, you want to make it sustainable, make sure people can actually get paid to work on this thing, while at the same time maintaining your open source values and not doing something that feels like it goes against the open source ethos, if you will.
Yeah, it's got to be, I'm glad it's this huge priority. It's got to be challenging at first. I mean, I've seen your blog post about it. We talked about it a little bit before, like what really went into this decision to be open source from the beginning, maybe, now that you're trying to plan this open business plan transition that we can talk about now or a little bit later. I mean, what went into that decision coming from where you guys started?
That's kind of funny, because the three founders are developers. We are developers, and so the project was open source from the beginning, because it was obvious to us that if we were going to work on some software, we had to make it open source. So we didn't have any strategy around commercial open source or anything like this. we just wanted to offer Meilisearch as a service, but from the beginning, the project was available on GitHub. So after a lot of different discussion with people from different startups in Paris and different open source companies all around the world, we just realized that open source is just something that you can do on the side. It's just not something that you have to maintain on the side, because that's not open source if anyone is using it, if anyone can use your project. And that was the case because we had no documentation. We had a very bad API, if I can say so, at this time. And yeah, we got some stars because people were interested at some point in what we were building, but we never communicate around the project or the product, which was open source. And yeah, we just realized after maybe 10 to 15 conversations with people that open source is a really great way to distribute software. And we should just focus on that first, and then we can think about how to monetize at some point the project. So I think that we created the company from the beginning because we knew that we wanted to create something out of a search engine, but also the search engine was open source from the beginning. But we didn't make the connection from the beginning about making a business model around open source.
Right. Comes out of it. I mean, one thing before we get into the search engine itself and how it works, I mean, what is any part of maybe that initial decision or how you've seen the development towards where you guys are planning on now and really developing an open business plan and figuring out how the direction you want your company to go? Was the decision of Rust or this relationship with the Rust community, how did that influence sort of the trajectory of where you've gone? I mean, as it is, you pick up Erlend because he's already familiar with Rust and that's how he becomes aware of it. It's not a language myself I'm very familiar with other than a few projects and now this, but where does that come from? How did that community maybe influence here?
The Rust was not really a choice we made because it was so obvious to us to go with Rust that it was a no-brainer when we get to choose the language. So when we, from the beginning, when it started at VP, we coded the search engine there in Golang because that was the most widely used language in the company, and it was obvious that in Golang you can have performances that would work for a search engine. But if you start from scratch any project when it comes to performance, you have mainly 3 to 4 choices. So you can go with C, CPP, Golang, or Rust. And I think Rust provides a modern ecosystem that allow you to maintain quite easily your work. We have the chance of having our CTO, which is the main developer of the search engine, I've been learning Rust from 6 years now. So from the beginning of Rust, he's really a Rust fan, a big fan, and he is also a contributor on the language, so he's very good at it now. So yeah, when talking about how should we build the company, if we went with him, it was obvious that it was going to be in Rust, of course, and we were quite it was a no-brainer when it comes to Rust, because you can have very great performances and still maintain a big code base quite easily. You have a very modern ecosystem, and the community is quite new and young, and so it's very easy to come in, and people are really easy to talk to. So it's really great for us. I mean, yeah, choosing Rust was the good choice in the end.
Yeah, to add to that, like the Rust community almost makes it easier in a way as well to be open source. Like it's since it comes from Mozilla, there's a lot of kind of love there already from open source from the very beginning, the deep roots of it, and the way Mozilla kind of started this whole community, and now they've kind of distributed it more, and it's less a top-down from Mozilla and a more bottom-up movement. But open source is very much integral to all parts of Rust, and I've even talked to a lot of companies that have said, like, we probably wouldn't have been open source if it wasn't for the fact that we were based on Rust. Like, because we were using Rust, it just made more sense to also go open source, because there's just so much excitement about it as well in the ecosystem, even in terms of just talking about what you're working on as well. You might have noticed on Stack Overflow, for instance, recently, there's been a bunch of stories about just Rust continuously getting to the top of the rankings as like the most loved language. And this feeds into all these very nice feedback loops as well in terms of being an open source product in this ecosystem. You get a lot of nice attention and a lot of really smart, wonderful people as well getting in touch with you. To just, everyone wants to help each other.
I remember hearing about Rust first from the Mozilla IRC server years ago. I know that it does a lot, particularly with respect to helping concurrency. How much does Meilisearch really, I mean, I'm not sure how heavily multi-threaded that Meilisearch is, but has that really been a beneficial factor for you?
Yes, sorry, I didn't hear well your question.
I know that Rust handles concurrency very differently from how it's handled in other languages. Mm-hmm. And in some ways that helps to go, that helps to develop multi-threaded applications, because you've got features like the borrow checker that, help to ensure you don't have race conditions, because Rust checks for any of a large number of things at compile time.
Yeah, as much as I know, is that there is very steep curves in terms of learning because of the borrow checkers and the compiler that you have to fight against. But from what I can see, because I'm the only one that is not coding in Rust from the 3 co-founders, they were quite fast to be very efficient when it comes to Rust. So every time they released new feature, we are very comfortable releasing it as soon as possible, because when the binary is compiled, it will run. So we do not have on our side, when we are building the search engine, as much as I know, because I'm not really sure about this, but I think that we do not manage anything regarding concurrency by ourselves, because we are using Actix for the web server, and we are using LMDB for the key value store. So what we are doing is mostly not only, but most of our work is around the algorithm that we need for the search engine and the API that we provide. So we do not have that much concurrency issue on ourselves.
So maybe we could talk about getting into maybe when we're talking about relevancy of a query, we get into the algorithm that you use. Can we maybe start, what are the basic concepts that we need to know for setting up a Meilisearch search server? Mouthful. So I have, let's say, public documentation is our example. Every page I'm considering a document. It's got text on it. I want a user to be able to come on the site and get the most relevant results to find exactly the page that they need to get to. We have a ton of documents, but we don't have millions of documents. We have, maybe 200 pages. So what attributes are going to go into each of those pages, and what determines the relevancy of a query in Meilisearch?
I can start by explaining how does Lucene work, because Lucene is the search engine that is used by Elasticsearch under the hood, or
Sure.
Solar. And Lucene was quite famous because they were using what they call the TF-IDF, so the term frequency inverse document frequency algorithm, which means that they are comparing basically, very basically, the number of the query, the words that you have in your query, and they compared this to the number of occurrence of this word that you can find in the documents. So for example, when you're searching for cat and you have documents containing 10 times the word cat, this document will be the most relevant because it has 10 times the word cat. And this is the algorithm from Lucene. And what we did is completely inspired by what Algolia described on their blog pages, yeah. And it's because when Algolia started, they had this, I think, they were doing a search engine that could work on a mobile phone. So they had this issue regarding performances. And so the search engine is much more simpler from the beginning. So what we have is a reversed index in which we store all the words that we can see in every document. So then we type a word, we can see that, for example, when I'm typing cat, I am redirected to all documents that contains cat, and we get all of them. And then there is a second part of the search engine that is doing the relevancy ordering. So what we call the ranking is we are using a bucket sort, which means that we have we have by default 7 rules, but you can have more or less. But on each rules, you are going to order each document, every document. And for the next rule, you are only keeping the number of documents that the user was searching for, or at least what you were configuring. So that means that when we are searching, when we are asking for only 20 documents, we are not searching, we are not ordering the 1,000 documents that were found with cat, but only the 20 documents that were ordered by the previous ranking. So that allows to have a very efficient and performant relevancy ranking, because you're only sorting the documents that you need in the end.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it does. I mean, this is when you get into the, customizable part of Meilisearch, because for us, the way that we took how you can set up custom ranking rules was, you have documents that have body text that really feed into the sort that's going on, and you can add custom attributes. For us, that was, we wanted to create a search engine for public documentation that pulled resources, not just from that, but from our API documentation, from our discourse community site, from our main marketing site. But we didn't want to lose the fact that if somebody's on your public documentation, that's probably really where they want the results to come from. So we can customize what we post to Meilisearch that says, I want an ascending ascending order as that first attribute to be this custom rank attribute, so that we can have everything else that flows from that. But from right off the beginning, I can say, if you're searching for, in our case, container, results are going to be prioritized for that particular attribute. I found it like really, really intuitive of starting to customize in that way.
Yeah, this is the difference between Elastic and what we're doing, is that during, as you said, the bucket sort, you can customize each rule so that allow you to really determine on which fields exactly you want to make the sort. Yeah, I'm happy that it's easy to customize based on the documentation.
Yeah, you guys got great documentation. I can.
Yeah, because this is something quite complicated to explain and then to manage. But at some point, I think you can have something very easy to customize for the end developer.
Yeah, I think that it was. Maybe we go there. I mean, Erlend, I'm DevRel as well. Challenge always is you put a bunch of time into trying to figure out how something works, and then you get into the communication stage. I mean, what's your hand in documentation and blog posts and in communicating some basic principles to differentiating yourself from another service like Elasticsearch. What's that like for you?
Well, I'm frankly just getting into that. Like, they were doing a really stellar job already with the documentation by the time I got involved. So I'm kind of just, still getting to grips with what they've already got going. They've got already one full-time dedicated person documenting Meilisearch, which I think is a very clever thing to do by the company. I see a lot of open source projects not do this nearly early enough, that you kind of do documentation past V1.0, for example. That's when you get into the docs of it. But Meilisearch has gotten a very early start on that, and that's been great to see. And the kind of one tricky part about it, of course, that we see kind of on the more on the DevRel and community side is normally at this point you'd have a lot more people coming in asking questions about how stuff works, but a lot about Meilisearch is explained quite well already. So we feel like we need to establish some more channels to make it easier for people to reach out to us, kind of even just in the case of success, essentially. They need to also have a way to talk to us about that, rather than just when they're not finding the docs that they're looking for.
Sure. We actually have a question in the chat right now. You got a fan here, somebody who's been using Meilisearch quite a bit on a personal project. I can totally back up that it's got great performance and is super fast and has been a great transition to start using it. But I guess they're curious if there's any public benchmark tests against Meilisearch against something like Elastic or Solar. Some of these alternatives are out there that you've put out.
Yeah, no, we didn't make any public benchmark yet. This is something that we have to do, because when we are saying we are more relevant and more fast, yeah, you have to prove it at some point. We did some benchmark at the beginning, but this is not something we are doing every day, because it's quite complicated to have this kind of stuff. I know that Redis have a module on search, and they are doing some public benchmark with Elastic, so we might use also this dataset to see how relevant, how fast we can be, because yeah, we didn't make any. I'm really sorry, we miss a lot of demo actually. This is kind of our maybe one of something that we really miss is like an easy demo to show off how does Meilisearch works, because the only demos that we have are from the package manager for Ruby, for Python, and for people that are not into development, it can be quite complicated to see how relevant it can be. So yeah, we need to work on this.
I mean, if anybody out there is interested in a demo, at least on the side that what platforms use, I did a webinar a few weeks ago that'll show you sort of setup steps, what we're talking about of setting ranking rules, of getting configuration of your Meilisearch server going and embedded inside your documentation, and what it looks like to start seeing some of that relevancy come out, even across site search type of use case. Oh, we actually got another one from Maxime. If Meilisearch is a low customization search engine, is there a goal to be a low development knowledge service? I guess this really points to documentation, into what it is that you're setting up demo-wise, or anything like. Maybe that kind of gears it over to you have gigantic sites that use something like Elasticsearch, and that's really, that may be their pigeonhole or not, but you have small to medium sites that maybe are what you guys are focusing on. Is that sort of what you're looking at? People who aren't necessarily intensely familiar with the search engine space and are just trying to get functional search on their site quickly? Is that where you're looking at with this, really promoting configuration, the lack of friction there?
No, but what we found is that there is always a race to I have enormous data set and I want to try this Meilisearch, or I want to play with it with my enormous data set. And in the end, what we can see is that most of the needs when it comes to front-end search They are from content website or media application or any B2B SaaS or e-commerce. And you don't have that much document in the end. I mean, even the biggest e-commerce website have at most some million documents, and that is not that much in the end. So what we are focusing today, of course, we cannot scale Meilisearch horizontally yet. So you can only scale it on one machine. So you are limited to what you can currently have today as the biggest machine. We are, of course, working on making it replicated, but not only for big data set, much more for being highly available. But when it comes to big data set, yeah, we believe that Elastic is the tool for the job, because yeah, it's made to be scaled for enormous data set. And yeah, we know that the relevancy is very good when you have, I mean, small data sets is like 5 to 10 million is working well with Meilisearch, and it's already working for a lot of different use cases. So the focus that we really try to have compared to Elastic is say, we are only doing front-end or customer-facing search. We are not doing queries, complex queries. We are not doing analytics. We are not doing business intelligence or analytics on the logs and stuff like this. We are only doing the search that will be served for your end user. So it's a narrower use case, but it's what we are currently focusing on.
Within those same lines, I mean, for our use case, it's entirely customer facing. You know, we've done this little finagling here where we've got multi-site in, but it's still maybe at most 1,000 documents. We have that in some internal documentation that we have for our support staff as well. I mean, Stephanie, I mean, what have you seen with Meilisearch so far? I know that it was Elasticsearch before.
It was.
So what was it like working with Elasticsearch, and for that use case?
Actually, our internal documentation made the jump to Hugo quite a bit before the public docs did, and we made some mistakes along the way with that implementation. We were migrating it from Gitbook, Gitbook 1.x, because Gitbook, had decided to no longer be an open source product, and so there was no future there. It was cloud hosted with them, software as a service or GTFO.
Yeah. Okay.
Our search implementation that we threw together, is definitely the operative word here, that we threw together with Elasticsearch. At the time we migrated, one of my colleagues that's no longer with the company was working on it, and we tuned it several times, and we could never strike a balance between getting relevant results and just getting, absolute garbage results of every, you'd either return just things that exactly match the keyword, or you'd return every document in the index. There was no middle ground. And as a result, for quite some time, our internal documentation, actually, should introduce myself. I'm actually one of the support engineers here at Platform. However, one of the hats that I wear, because we don't really have like any kind of central coordination for our internal documentation, but I kind of try to, on the side of what I do in support, I kind of try to reach out to the various teams that use our documentation and just keep things on the same track. The documentation was at a point where the search wasn't useful. And we use search in some really interesting ways as a company. You know, whether you're in support, engineering, ops, because we use the search to refresh our memories. And you may remember, you know, there was this command I used last time, or, you know, you may remember I'm trying to configure this service. You know, so what you're looking for isn't necessarily the title or even in the description of the document. It's just, I remember this fragment of what I did last time. I want to search for that fragment. And that, you know, we never got to that point, you know, despite lots of configuring with Elasticsearch. And, you know, so when our public documentation site implemented, implemented Meilisearch, you know, we reached out to our DevRel team that was working on that, and you know, Ori, who's our chief product officer, and Chad actually did the work to integrate it with.
Oops.
The search was changed. You could actually find things. I mean, and that, you know, and it was, you know, still as fast or faster. And you know, you put in some random fragment of knowledge and got what you were actually looking for, which, you know, I think is a huge success story.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, is there anything that you might attribute that to, Erlend or Thomas? I mean, that this kind of, at least in her experience, really increased relevancy on searches versus Elasticsearch?
Yeah, but that's normal in the sense of Elastic is made for an enormous kind of different use cases.
Yeah.
And it's not made for only, we are just focusing on a subset. So, I mean, that's fortunate, but yeah, we are better than Elastic on this kind of use cases because we are trying to work on this. So the default configuration that we have should work for 80% of the people that are using Meilisearch, because this is what we aim for, at least. And the rest of the configuration that you could have could improve what you already have in terms of search. But the big pain point of Elastic being you still need to understand how does it works if you want to have something a little relevant. So for example, I think that out of the box, Elastic does not manage typo tolerance, which is very bad when it comes to customer facing stuff, because when you're typing quite fast, you need to have this kind of basic features. And yeah, I'm very glad that Meilisearch could improve this kind of use cases. And this is also what we are looking at, is to say, okay, there are this whole lot of application that uses a very bad search engine, and people are used to bad search engine because they get used to it at some point. I know, for example, that in some application, you know that you can search only by ID, or you can search only by SKU ID, because you have to know the ID of the product you're searching for, the SKU ID that on the product you're searching for. And this is not the role of the search engine. So this is really what we are trying to do with this open source project, is to say, okay, now everyone could use this kind of relevancy and speed and stuff that you are used to when you're using Google or Amazon. But when it comes to have this search engine search experience for your own application or your own website, you can take a lot of time configuring Elastic, or yeah, you can just try Meilisearch, which seems to be a much more simpler solution, I hope.
Maybe that's an answer to your question there, Larry. I see in the thread the biggest benefit is maybe real focus on this one subset of things that Elasticsearch and Solr really have this broader feature set, and doing it well, doing it fast, and typo tolerance is a really great advantage that I've seen already in our docs and in Playbook and in our internal docs. There's another question here from Geometrically. Are there any plans to introduce GraphQL into Meilisearch's into its API, anything like that? I know that I've worked a lot with GraphQL recently, working with Gatsby. I know we talked about Gatsby a little bit last time we spoke. Anything GraphQL wise you guys are thinking about?
It was not the primary API that we provided because HTTP is the HTTP RESTful is still the standard, and that's why we choose to go with it. But we believe that the developer's experience is still very important. So when it comes to having more friendliness API, we should go with a GraphQL at some point. But that was not the focus from the beginning, but at some point we really aim to ease the work of the developer. So GraphQL will help us do that.
Yeah, I've only worked with it a little bit recently, but it's been interesting and I like it. It would be cool to see that in Meilisearch. But what I've seen so far with the REST API that you've set up, I mean, it works. It's flexible. I mean, it's an interesting question though. One thing that I've seen recently, I don't know if you guys want to speak about it all, Erlend, Thomas, you have this release recently of faceted search. So we're not implementing any filters. Maybe I see a whole point within the blog that they're not filters. Maybe we can go over that. But what is this new announcement that's coming up of adding, real category matching and category narrowing down documents? So what's going on there with this announcement?
The faceted search is something that a lot of people using search were used to. It's like a basic feature when it comes to search engine.
Sure.
We didn't have that until last week because we needed to be sure that we had something very, very fast and very easy to use. And it can be quite complicated to still have something fast when it comes to filter and facets. And what is really interesting with filters and facets is that you can now restrict your search to certain facets. And this is really useful when you have a lot of different documents that are very similar, but that can have some small differentiation. Or another example could be when you're on Amazon and you're searching for anything, you have this small sidebar where you can select only the categories you want to search in. And this really helps to have very good and very easy to use interface when it's search-centric. It's not for every use cases, of course. And what can be useful at some point, but we do not have a very good authentication system. But what we will be working on in the coming weeks is an authentication system. And at some point you could have, some keys that are linked to some specific facets. So that could help you to have only one index that can be clusterized. So you can have one index for a lot of different customers, and each customer will search in the same index, but with their only their API key that will be linked to a specific facet. They will be able only to search through this smaller part of the index. So,
right.
So this is something that was quite. It was not easy to implement, and that's why we take our time on this, because we really want to have something that is still performant and that can be used quite easily. So we worked also on the API. This is something we really try to care about, because the team is made of 7 developers today. So we are really sensitive to when it comes to developer experience. And we really know that all the developers are not working in the same ways. we have in the team people that never read the docs and are just trying to play with the API. And we have people that are reading the doc from the beginning. So we know that there are different types of developers, and we are really trying to have this developer experience that is easy and at least intuitive to use when it comes to the API. And that can be complicated when you are releasing some features that can be complex to explain and to use. So the facet is one of them, and yeah, that's why we took our time on it. But at least we have something that can be useful in a lot of different use cases. And until last week, we had a lot of people that were interested in Meilisearch but couldn't use it because they needed faceted search.
Right. Well, I apologize ahead of time if the audio pokes through. Anyone who's been on a video conference with me before knows my cat has the loudest litter box in the world. I apologize. I know that you guys wanted to talk a little bit about this transition open source. We touched on it briefly at the beginning. Can you guys tell me about this other announcement, this open business plan that you placed out recently, and where you see long-term partnership-wise, where you guys see this thing all going? Maybe everyone, you want to speak on that?
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to begin that we made the open source product. We have some ideas on how to monetize it. And this is really what we are working on with Erlend, and this is where he really shines in the companies, helping us better understand how to make a sustainable project around Meilisearch.
Fantastic, yeah.
Yeah, so open source combined with money is like a little bit of a fraught subject, because it sort of has its roots in very volunteer-driven work that just it's done out of the goodness of your heart, and there's a community that pulls together and just does this thing to scratch their own itch. And yeah, the more recent companies that have started to figure out ways to do open source as part of a business, the community is like a little bit split about it, of whether or not they should trust these companies that have found a way to mix money with open source. But personally, I don't really see the controversy at all, as someone who's been in open source 15 odd years now, and starting with the first half of that being entirely volunteer, and very much feeling the burden of an open source project that got large and became a big maintenance burden. And we kind of started out way too late trying to figure out, okay, how do we make this actually sustainable for ourselves so that we can get paid to do this thing that we love doing. I've really loved since then to work for open source companies that have started working on this puzzle of how do you do a business that at the same time sustains an open source product that you're making at the same time. So what we're trying to do with this open source or open business plan and other upcoming posts like it is to just talk as openly as possible just about how this works, like what does it look like when a business is trying to figure this out? It already has this open source product that is completely liberally licensed. There's no restrictions whatsoever there. If we didn't talk ever about being a business, people would just assume this is some excellent open source project that just happens to have a whole bunch of developers working very actively on it, and they would be fine with that. But we want to be more upfront about why this is actually possible. Why is this? Why is there a whole team working on this, and why does it? Why does it work? So yeah, initially now in this first post we've done, we've just started talking about very generally, just here's the very rough plan, like all startups do. We're kind of just throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks. And so we're just laying out, the first initial plan of this is where we're headed for the next year or so, and how we are planning to make money with kind of the traditional approach of doing a SaaS service on the side that then sustains the open source products as well.
No, I mean, I'm excited for when you guys direct my attention to that, because it's an interesting conversation. I know we're having a Deploy Friday in a few weeks that's all about, funding open source projects and really trying to walk this line. I mean, what's the next year look for you guys in this direction?
Well, what kind of drew me as well to the company with an announcement they made a few months ago was that they were now kind of, like Thomas explained, they kind of started off being open source almost a little bit by accident, because it's just a good way to develop good software. And then they realized, okay, there's actually a bit more to this. If you want to make the most out of being open source, then you got to make that part of who you are as a company as well. And that's very much the focus for the next year as well, is to be extremely developer focused. And it's just going to be about building a community around Meili that more and more people who actually know almost as well as we do how everything works, how it's put together. And that will also lead into one of my favorite experiences from Discourse was how at least half, I would say, of our employees, they just came through the community. They were just people we already knew, and eventually kind of just tapped them on the shoulder and said, like, maybe you should just start working for us full time. And that's just an amazing way of hiring people. It just feels so great when you're not seeing this person for the first time, and you got to spend all this time getting to know each other and get a feel for if this is the right fit. You actually you've been around this person in kind of the big neighborhood that is an open source community for a long time already. So we want to optimize for experiences like that, where there's a pretty thin line between the employees of Meilisearch and the contributors that are participating in it as well.
Sure. I mean, part of that I have to imagine comes from all these libraries they put to interact with Meilisearch in different languages. I know I've been working a lot with the Go library that you have, the Go package. Is there anything else that's in the works? Maybe other languages that I don't see there? Maybe
well, certainly a big thing is going to be just more languages and frameworks that we're going to have integrations with. One of the big things we're also working on is just to have this sandbox experience. So not even necessary no longer than to do your own sort of self-hosting or local setup to play with Meilisearch. You can just very easily test it online to start playing with it, which is also very nice even for developers who want to start to just know how the basics work, even though they don't have like a full developer environment set up with it.
Sure.
And yeah, hopefully we'll also get into some a little bit more experimental projects later. Like we've talked about, we really want to get more live demos going. So we're always on the lookout for ways that we can collaborate with existing communities where we're sort of building something together that's going to get real use. Like we mentioned, these package manager demos, for instance, that we've been putting together, and would love to have some of those demos get turned into just, this is Meilisearch now that you're using to search for packages in this language ecosystem, for instance. So we're talking to a couple different open source communities to hopefully become kind of their partner for search.
I like that demo a lot. I like that idea. Something just comes to my head, not even super relevant, but where does this name come from? Where's Meilisearch come from?
Meili is in the northern mythology the god of forgetfulness. So yeah, honestly, we were trying to find a name for a search engine for quite long, and we really liked the idea of Discord, the tool used to chat. And what I really like about the idea of Discord is that they are trying to resolve Discord using their tool. And this is the idea that we primarily follow when we choose Meili. And at some point, we also thought about, Meili is cool, but that doesn't talk to anyone what we are doing. So we just added the search behind so that people can better understand what is it about, because when you are on the project on the GitHub page and you have just Meili or MeiliDB, which was the actual name before Meilisearch, you cannot understand what is it about. So we just added the Meilisearch, the search part yeah, in order to be more clear and concise around what we are doing.
Sure. Search for what you've forgotten.
Yeah.
No, not too shabby. We got one question here in the thread as we're kind of closing out the last few minutes here. It's got cut off, but I think I can kind of tell where it was going. The use of synonyms in Meilisearch. And you saying that you specify them in the indexes setting. Is there anything, and it gets cut off? I'll just say briefly that in the documentation that I've seen, that you can place a post that updates the synonym settings to your Meilisearch server. I know for us, we have it as a separate call right now within the Python library where we're updating ranking rules, adding synonyms. Is there any other way to interact with synonyms? I guess is their question. For me, one thing I'm interested in is there any reason that there isn't a default to make synonyms two-way?
Yeah, at some point, we might add some default synonym, maybe. We're not sure about that because it really depends on the use cases. For example, I know that we have some customers that are using us in the e-commerce part, and some words are very are synonyms to other words when you are in this business, but not in everyday worlds. So this is mostly the reason that we don't have default synonyms for languages, for the different languages. Maybe that could be an option to add, like, yeah, you know, you are searching in French or you're searching in English, and we want to allow you to have this basic data set of synonyms, but it's still complicated to decide whether the synonyms are good or not for your use case. So that's mainly the reason we don't have defaults.
Sure. I mean, for me, the default that I'm interested in specifically is if say on our documentation, a page that we might actually be directing user has to do with a configuring an application container in PHP, or just in general. There's a list of languages. We have this application container, but the file that we use to do that is this .platform.app.yaml file. I want to be able to have a synonym for the string of that file name and for app container, but I have to separately post the relationship between those two synonyms. It won't automatically be a two-way equivalent.
In 2 ways.
Yeah, that's sort of what I'm curious about, if there's any reason for that choice.
No. There is actually, that's a good feedback, because this might be something we could work on. I know that the synonym is something that we know people are using, but on our personal use cases, we are not using that much synonym. So when we made the API regarding synonym, we made something very simple, maybe for us, but not for everyone. So we might have a little thought about how to design the API around synonyms, because this might be something we made maybe a little too fast.
Building on that question, actually the part that was cut off, is there anything to infer synonyms?
Infer synonym? No, not yet. No, I don't know. Sorry.
Well, we're pretty much coming at the end of the stream. Is there anything that you guys want to highlight? You know, things that are coming up for you. We touched a little bit on what you're hoping to work on. I love the playground idea, especially with indexing package management ecosystems.
Yeah, we are using Platform.sh for the sandbox platform that we are building. So
there you go.
That's quite cool. Yeah,
fantastic.
Yeah. So that's really great. I think it was a really good surprise when we found that Platform was using Meilisearch for their documentation, because we knew Platform before. And yeah, we are glad to see that people were actually happy about the API, because you can hear about people that are coming to us and saying, yeah, I don't understand, how does that work? So we know we have to work on this. but we have not that much people saying, yeah, very good design on this API. So that's actually very good to have some good feedbacks, because that comfort us in the way we are actually trying to do things at Meilisearch.
No, I mean, absolutely. It's been great so far, and glad to see that Platform's been a cool place to test out some of this playground stuff that you're working on.
Yeah.
Thank you guys all for joining us. Stephanie, thank you for joining me as a co-host with your questions. Thomas, Erlend, thank you again. Good seeing you again. You got love in the chat if somebody's a Meilisearch user. And thank you everyone for joining us. If you have any questions about Meilisearch, in the description, you have link to the documentation. You can go actually to our documentation and see it in action. Oh yeah, of course. Yeah. If you go to their documentation, you go to their website, you can enter their Slack channel. They've been great. I've asked a few questions there as I was setting this up. Same with us. Check out Platform.sh, check our documentation to see Meilisearch in action. And you can actually, our repository for our documentation is open on GitHub. You can see it in action, and we'll have a template in our template catalog coming out in the next few days that we'll be sure to send out to you all. So thank you so much for joining Deploy Friday again, and take care, everyone.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.